There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Nicole, a CPAC Certified Learning Experience Designer. I'm excited to be here with you today and talk about designing with accessibility and creating content that is inclusive. You can access the slides. They're in the chat if you'd like to follow along and have access to links that I take you to. I'm on my screen sharing those slides, but I'm also sharing some other links that I'm going to use for demonstrations. So if you'd like to have those open, please go ahead and do that now. This is going to be interactive, collaborative. So if you're willing and able to participate, we'll utilize the chat. I have no problem if you want to come off your mute, raise your hand and speak as well. That's an option. So together we'll work through the session and hopefully we'll be able to, learn alongside each other. So just very quickly, I'm a former business teacher and school principal. I've been on my own now for the past, I don't know, 6, 7 years. I lose count, but I do work for my own organization where I do accessibility consulting and designing and supporting others, instructional designers and educators on designing accessibility. So here's what we'll cover in the next 45 minutes. We will explore the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG standards. We'll also identify some tools and resources for remediating and identifying those issues. And I also want to note that all links in this presentation will open in a new tab. So on slide 3, I have a quick check for us. You can use the chat to put this in. So are you familiar with WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines? I'd like to know from this group here. A, not familiar, your first exposure. B, I'm somewhat familiar, I've heard of it. Maybe C, you're familiar and refer to it when designing. And D, I'm very familiar, I apply it regularly, I help others, you're the go-to person. So let's see who we have today. All right, Sarah, thank you. Jennifer, awesome. Kenny, great. Thank you, thank you. I like seeing, I like the pluses. I like the options that you've included, B plus, BC, B. Okay, great. So somewhere between I'm somewhat familiar to I'm very familiar. Excellent. So as we're going through the guidelines, I'm also going to make sure that we discuss that it's more than about compliance, that it's about human beings. And so as we engage in this work, sometimes we can get really bogged down in technical language and technical standards. But really when we build with accessibility in mind, and we're building for everyone. We don't just build for those with disabilities. It improves experiences for everyone. We think about captions in noisy environments. We think about high contrast on a mobile device. We think about simple navigation, and that it goes beyond the compliance. It is best practice. And as you get more familiar with the standards and apply them, it starts to make sense why this is a framework and why it's a foundation and why we say design with accessibility in mind, because it's helping all of us in some way. And at some point in our lives, we may all experience some barriers, and they can be situational, they could be temporary. So when we talk about accessibility, it goes beyond the blind learner, the deaf and hard of hearing. It goes beyond those who have cognitive disabilities. It really includes all of us. And so on my screen, I'm sharing the curb cut effect. If you've seen this image before, let us know. And when we design for disabilities, we make this better for everyone. And the image, I'm going to describe that. It's a cartoon styled illustration. And the image shows a variety of stick figure people in a park-like environment, demonstrating how curb cuts, wheelchair accessible ramps benefit everyone, not just individuals with disabilities. And so on the left, we see a person pushing a stroller, another person walking or using that curb cut. We see a person in a wheelchair moving through the same curb cut. We also see a person pushing a cart filled with boxes. In the background, we see people engaging in various activities. And the illustration is also emphasizing universal design by showing the feature intended for accessibility improves usability for all. And at the bottom, this is says where the images came from. It's sketch planations. And I also have an image description there. You can access and take that if you'd like to use it in any of your presentations or refer to it when talking about accessibility, especially universal design. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at the structure overview, and we will get technical, but I'll also talk about, from the bigger picture, where to start. So the WCAG 2.2 structure overview, there are 4 principles. And so when you start to see numbers, you'll see a 1 in front of a standard, or a 2, a 3, and a 4, and those numbers identify which principle from the core principles that we're referring to. So we've got perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And of that, there are 13 guidelines that go within the 4 principles. And then there are 86 success criteria, which is why a lot of folks feel that it gets overwhelming or that it's a lot of information, because there's a lot of success criteria. But what we're looking at is that we have the big picture of four principles: perceivable, operable, understandable. And within each one of those, there are the 13 guidelines on my screen. So I have perceivable, I have understandable, operable, and robust showing. And then I have the 4 that go with perceivable, the 3 that go with understandable, and then 5 operable, and then 1 for the robust. And so we can start to ground ourselves in how this is structured. And the more we understand how it's structured, the easier it is to identify, and the easier it is to then understand. So when we think about where do I start, I usually say, well, let's just start with, can someone see it, hear it, and navigate it? So where should I start? Start with poor, perceivable, operable, understandable, robust. Can people see it, hear it, navigate it? Does it work across devices? We want everything to be keyboard friendly. I'm going to do a keyboard demo. So some learners don't or can't use a mouse, and that's why our courses should work with keyboards only. And then how do you start? Well, you can try by navigating it using some of your keyboard commands, which I'm going to do right now with you here. I usually also at this time in this presentation, people will ask, well, how do I get others on board with accessibility? How do I communicate the importance, or help my team members and my leadership see the purpose? And if someone is approaching this with, I don't have enough time, I don't have the budget, those are valid things that we hear often. I usually start with, okay, so tell me which group you're okay excluding. So we don't have the time, you don't have the money. Where are you okay with cutting corners and not including all people? And it seems and it sounds like a real harsh thing to say, but it's a reality. If we're not making the time, if we're not putting in the effort, then we are intentionally and unintentionally excluding people from the learning experience, our students from the learning experience. So I try to remind folks that that we want to include everyone. So let's do a keyboard testing. If you'd like to follow along, I'm going to use my Brightspace course here. So you can pull up anything that you're working with in Canvas, Brightspace, Moodle, whatever LMS. Maybe you're using an e-learning course. If you have something available, great. Otherwise, you can follow along as I do the demo. So I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit too. And what I want to do is over on the left-hand side of my computer, on my screen here, I'm going to start with the first tab. So by using the tab key, I have focus order, the My Home icon, and I'm showing you that as I click tab, I'm going to move to the next element or focusable indicator or focusable element, which is making online content accessible for all title. And as I continue to tab, it should go in a logical focus order. It should then move in a sequence that makes sense for learners. And I should be able to access all of this content with just my keyboard. So I'm tabbing. To go backwards, it's Shift Tab. So I want to be able to go back, Shift Tab, and I will continue down to the menu bar, and I'm going to bring us all the way into week 1, down as I'm going into week 2 by pressing Tab, and I'm going to go into week 3, and I'm going to return. So if I hit the return key, it'll open up this week. I am going to cheat here and do view as learner for a second, and then jump right back to week 3. All right, so as I'm moving through the course, I'm tabbing and checking to make sure that one, icons and focus elements are still appearing. Brightspace does a great job with not only icons, but the labeled expandable navigation sidebar. And I'm going to continue, and I want to go and find an element. So when I find an element or an interactive component in my course, what I'd like to do here is show you that from tab, once I'm in an element, I then switch to using the cursor. So if I want to go to the next one, enough time, keyboard accessible, 2.1, enough time, 2.2. I'm not going to tab in this tab element because it'll take me to the next focusable item, which if what it would be the arrow key. So if you're with me here, I'm just going to tab, shift tab, and I'm going to use my arrow key once I'm back to move within tabs, and then return will bring me inside a tab. So if you have questions throughout this, please pause and ask if you're following along with the tabbing and you want to give it a try. So I'm going to continue to demonstrate here. So inside the, this is a horizontal component with tabs going across. It would do the same thing if I was using one that was vertical. So on the next page, time limits and control features, I'm going to show you another panel here that goes vertically. And once I'm inside this element, if I press tab, it's going to take me to the next focusable item. But once I'm inside, I would start to use the arrow keys to make sure that I can navigate inside that panel. So getting familiar with keyboard testing is one way to get started. Is there a keyboard shortcut cheat sheet available? Yes, there is. And so, when we get to the operable, Morgan, remind me if you want, or I'll point it out. There's a link to WebAIM, which will take you to a keyboard shortcut place to memorize or to look at. So, so again, perceivable. And perceivable is where we start to talk about alt text. If you're familiar, based on your responses, you mostly are familiar with the alt text, the transcripts for audio and audio descriptions. What I hear a lot too is, do I need to have a transcript? Do I need to have audio descriptions? Yes, the level A requires you to have audio, transcript, have transcripts and captions. And then there are techniques in order to meet best practices. So we have the compliance or the level A and double A that we're trying to meet, but then we want to talk about what's inclusive and best practice. Well, we want to make sure that the names are included, who's speaking and when. We want to include any visuals that may not have been spoken that were important to the context of the discussion, expressions, laughter, anything that we could add context to. So we could dive into that a little bit more. We want to ensure sufficient color contrast, right? There's a 4:1 ratio, and there are tools that allow us to do that. So I will quickly pull up what I have, my WebAIM contrast color checker. And I have it inside my, I have a bookmark on my browser, and I would be able to select contrast checker. And I have my WebAIM foreground background picker right here. And I can use my eyedrop tool to pick up and say, okay, let's get the background or the foreground. And I want to compare it against a different color. And I want to know if normal text, which is 14-point passes, or large text, which is 18-point passes. And I can see that. Non-text elements, I want to make sure that if I'm creating a quiz and I have interactive elements, that those icons and selectable areas are also meeting contrast, which is the non-text elements, and that is a 3:1 ratio. So tools like WebAIM Contrast Checker are also something that you can use to check to make sure sufficient color contrast. I'll put a link to that as well. if I didn't at the end of the presentation. I usually am pretty good about those resources, but if I mention something that's not here, just let me know and I'll drop it in. The other thing, avoiding using color as the only way to convey meaning. See charts a lot of times where we're using pie charts and graphs, and we don't always notice it until we're reminded to look. But if we rely on color alone to convey information, we're not really inclusive of everyone that needs to see the text or the labels as well. So for color blindness, but also for cognitive abilities, we want to add a label. We want to add the text that goes along with the color. Also, underlining hyperlinks. If you're colorblind, you might not know that it's a hyperlink. And so that's the reason we still stayed back. I mean, I learned this. I was teaching web design to middle schoolers in high school back in 2001 through 2006. And I was teaching HTML code using Notepad at the time and teaching underline. And it didn't really I didn't really, relate to why we did alt text or underlining at that time for accessibility. It's just like, this is how you teach it. But that's why we do underline, and we still underline hyperlinks today. So operable, we just went over that, was the keyboard. I did the demo for you, and then the proper use of heading. So why is that? I'll ask you, and you can chime in here too. Why is it important for us to use the H1 through H6 for headings when creating layouts and structures of content on a page? And it's good for everyone, but also it's important to not just bold or large the text, because if you're a screen reader user, you can navigate the page by pulling up all of the headings. And so having the proper nested H1, heading 1 at the title, typically we use 1, and then you can have multiple H2s and H3 and going in order, is so that screen reader users can access it. But also, I also love headings too. Yeah, love Laura loves headings. Like, it's just easy to scan a page. I teach a course right now, and we have an instructional designer who is blind, and he will always talk about headings from his perspective, from whether designing them or when he's in the course looking at and doing his own evaluations of how, even when it seems like it makes sense to us, the heading structure, that if you can't see it, that it looks very different for how they're using that with their screen reader. So makes the layout of the page clear. Absolutely. Yes. And then also operable, we have a standard 2.2.2. You'll start to get familiar with perceivable anytime you see a 1, operable anytime you see a 2. Understandable, there's always a 3 to start, and then robust, there's always a 4 to start. So 2.2.2 and 2.2.3, we avoid flashing content or we avoid anything that's on loop playing for more than 3 seconds, and that is to help those with motion sickness, triggering seizures, and those pieces there. So let's take a look. I have a scenario of an example. Otherwise, I'll go too far down the rabbit hole here. All right, so pause, stop, hide, as I was just saying. So let's look at the scenario. You created an animated congratulations and the screen in your course, or GIF, what do we say? With flashing stars and rapidly changing colors to celebrate learners who completed the module. There's no stop, there's no pause, and there's no hide included. And so that fails the WCAG 2.2. And it also fails 2.3. It's on a loop and it plays longer than 3 seconds. So what's the solution? Have an ability to pause it, have an ability to stop it, or have the ability to hide it. Sometimes with this one too, if we have videos or animations that autoplay, you could include a pause, a stop, a hide. However, if we didn't include if we just let it autoplay, it might be compliant, but not always inclusive. So this is where it really challenges us to think critically around, okay, so maybe I met the standard when I included a pause, stop, or hide button, but I autoplayed it. And that might create a barrier for someone who's in a noisy environment, it gets easily distracted, can get frustrated and flustered, panicking to turn off the autoplay. So something to think about with 2.2 and 2.3. So keyboard testing, we did that one. If you'd like to give it a try yourself, I think that'd be a really great way to practice. And this link here will take you to, let me open that up, WebAIM keyboard test table. So if you select the link on slide 12, WebAIM keyboard test table, there is a quick table to take a look at for interaction, keystrokes, and notes, and how to navigate back and forth. So this is your cheat sheet. There's enter and spacebar typically is what we use to activate, and screen readers say it says activate, so that's the language there. And then once you're inside a quiz or a select option, a checkbox, a radio, that's when you start to use spacebar to select those items. And so this will be helpful to you to practice navigating inside your courses to see if it meets that criteria. Also, let's see. I did want to show you one other. Let me see where I'm at. Understandable. All right, let's continue on, and then I want to show you if how to test your for 1.4, which is a Zoom text as well. So understandable is our third principle. And so that's where we talk about using clear language, avoid jargon. We describe our hyperlinks as opposed to learn here or avoid click here. I just had this long conversation. If you follow me on LinkedIn and if you are interested, there is an interesting discussion right now around, should we use the word click? Should we use the word select? Should we use the word choose? What's more inclusive? What's intuitive? So we think a lot about these things, right, as we are creating our courses. So but anyway, so back to hyperlinks is that we want to be descriptive because I don't want to click on a link that just says learn more or select here or choose this. I don't know where it's going. So the more descriptive, that's for everyone, that we want to have that navigation and provide, where we're headed. Versus also a screen reader user typically will bring up all the links on the page. And so they'll want to know where they're going or what they're doing. And sometimes you'll see opens in new tab, like I said at the beginning of this presentation. And when I create courses at the beginning of every module, I will say all links will open in a new tab because not all screen readers announce that the tab is opening, and the way that they interact with that link or activate that link, if it opens in a new tab, they use different controls. So giving them the heads up that it will open in a new tab is important. Sometimes those things are already told for, back in the code and it's happening. I asked the learner in the course that I'm taking that I'm teaching right now, who's in Brightspace, and I said, what is it telling you? And they're saying, nope, JAWS is not announcing it. So I was like, okay, then every time I do an announcement or I put it in there, I always say opens in a new tab. But again, every module I do a reminder, tabs open in it, window, new tab, giving the heads up. So, yeah, and not relying, and this one's just talking about like icons and color and text and just being very clear in the navigation and consistent. So here's a scenario for understandable. We can do this one. I'd love it if you did it. If you're not in a place to, that's okay too. But for the task would be using ChatGPT, paste sample text and try prompts. Can you rewrite this content to be at blank grade level, reading level, keep the meaning the same, but simplify the vocabulary and sentence structure? So I have it queued up here. Let me go to my ChatGPT. This is a ChatGPT that I created for the course, and I also linked it in the slide. So if you wanted to use this, it's called Accessibility Guide for Online Content. And I have queued up already. Can you rewrite this content to be at a blank grade reading level? Keep the meaning the same, but simplify the vocabulary sentence structure. And the sample text that I selected is protecting the environment requires understanding how ecosystems function, recognizing the impact of human activity, and applying sustainable practices to reduce harm. Scientists and communities must work together to monitor environment changes, conserve natural resources, and promote responsible decision-making to maintain ecological balance and ensure a healthy planet. That is a mouthful. Healthy planet for future generations. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT to see if it could bring this into readability level. And there is a standard in 3.1 understandable that talks about readable levels. And so it's not necessarily a preference or a nice to have. It is under one of the technical standards. Just let me know what grade level. Actually, I forgot to. So let's say 8th grade level. Still love middle school. They'll always be my favorite. Okay, protecting the environment means understanding how ecosystems work, knowing how human actions affect nature, and using smart habits to cause less harm. Scientists and communities need to work together to watch for changes, save natural resources, and make careful choices. This helps keep nature in balance and protects the planet for future generations. All right, let's try grade 6 and see what happens here. To protect the environment, we need to learn how nature works, understand how people can hurt it, and find better ways to take care of it. Scientists and communities should work together to watch for changes, save resources like water and trees, and make smart choices. This helps keep nature healthy and safe for the future. So you can give that a try. The other one that I sometimes use is Hemingway app, which you may be familiar with as well, but there's a subscription to that. And so ChatGPT, you can use the free version and work to check your readability levels. Okay, how are we doing on time? 102. Okay. How much
Few
do I
more
have to
minutes.
115?
You have until, yes, 1:15.
Okay. I want to make sure there's time for questions. So we explored the principles, perceivable, operable, understandable, robust. So we would now apply it to a scenario with a learner so we have a learner experience. I'll read this, and then I'd love for you, if you're able to in the chat, engage with the scenario. So your student is sitting at their desk in front of their computer using their mouse. They log on to the LMS and select the course they need to take. They turn up the volume on their speakers and listen to the narrator speak, while images fade in and out on the screen. A few moments later, the course poses a series of questions about the images on the screen. They use their mouse to click on, drag, and drop and submit their answers. Okay, so now let's look at the same learner. Let's say, for instance, that same learner has hearing loss. What would their experience be like when taking this course? Now imagine that they're not able to use a mouse. The course had interactive exercises. Can they navigate this course with only a keyboard? And lastly, imagine they have a visual impairment. Will they be able to identify the images to answer the questions? So let's discuss the barriers and suggest a strategy or a design feature that would help remove it. So what have you done in the past? What do you do now? What might you do? And then you could also then take it a step further and align it to a guideline and a criteria to support that solution. So we would look at, I gave this link here, WCAG guideline and criteria. I took that out of the quick reference guide, out of the W3C, and put it into spreadsheet format for you. And the tabs are titled by their guidelines: perceivable, non-text, perceivable multimedia, perceivable, adaptable, and distinguishable. They have the first 4 tabs. And then I gave operable its own tab and understandable its own tab, and I didn't include robust. There are 2 that go with that for screen reader. So you can take a look at this and then take the scenario and apply what is the barrier, what is the strategy or feature to help remove the barrier, make it more inclusive, and then align it to a standard. And I will say this isn't perfect. Many times we do this exercise and then you do user testing, and the person doing the testing, if they use a screen reader, will say, well, that met the standard and that worked really well, but here's why it didn't work in practice, or I mean, as a practical example. So these are the way to get started. And then we certainly want to include people in that testing as well. So thinking about it. If you would like to, I'd love to hear what you have to say. What are some of the things you do currently? If you want to share with the group. Yes. Thanks, Laura. So barrier not being able to see the images. Images would need to have a written description of the images, focusing on the element, so that they're able to sort. Yeah. Then have an alternative drag and drop activity. Yes. So 2.25, if I'm saying that right. I don't memorize them all. No, you wouldn't have to because you can look them up. But 2.57 dragging movements provide alternatives to drag and drop. So that's one of our standards. Absolutely. So that would, you would align it there, and then you'd also align it to perceivable non-text content, level A. And when we talk about the levels, right? So we know that the new Title II, if you're familiar with the new Title II ruling by 2026 and 2027, we're required to meet compliance for that technical standard. And so ADA Title II has always been in play and but we now had the technical standard to support it. So when we start to look at level A and level double A, that's where you start. And then we always aim for more. But those are the level in which we're aiming for. So when you look at these, you're also looking at what level. So I always say level A, we must do, level double A, we should be doing, and level triple A it would be great to be doing. This is where we want to be. What other barriers or strategies do you suggest? Or strategies? Okay. So here's a summary of potential barriers. So there were no captions, no transcripts for audio video, making sure we have those. 1.2.5 double A. The audio descriptions describing visuals in audio or video is at the level A. So that is a requirement. You have the option of putting it in a text format at the level A, and you have an option of putting it into voice audio. So at level A, you can either do it in writing or you can do it in audio. And then level double A, you do it in audio. So some tricks that I do for that is I record a video, or let's say like this session right now, it would be recorded, and then I would overlay a track of myself pausing the video to describe something that I missed. So if I wanted to post this on YouTube, I would automate, I would edit the captions, make sure that they have been cleaned up and they're correct. And then I would overlay it with an audio description of myself pausing the video to describe anything that I missed that needed more of a description. And so these would be the other standards applied. So you've considered experience, the barriers, you've explored solutions. And so then we need to ask, does it work? And so I've provided you some tools here, accessibility tracking document and accessibility review document. So standard formats in spreadsheets, the accessibility tracking document would look like a place for you and your team to keep track. Learning asset, it was a slide deck, it was a video, it was a PDF. It was an e-learning module. Maybe it was a Canvas module. What was the format? What was the criteria that you identified? What was the severity level? Critical being that an entire group was not able to access that. Significant is many cannot access, and then moderate and recommendation. You determine these in your team, low priority, high priority, but you'd have some type of level. And then the description, the fix needed assigned to status. And always the other part is location. If you're going to work on this together as a team and you're going to be fixing these, you also want to have location, and you would put the link or a screenshot or some way for someone to easily find it. So that is the tracking tool. And then the other document that I gave you, an accessibility review document. This one is a little more of kind of like I'm going through a course and I'm the reviewer. So I was an LMS administrator and an instructional designer for a Moodle that we had for teachers to take for continuing ed around multi-tiered systems of support. And we had about 15,000 active users on the platform. And we had a catalog when I started of about 45 courses, and we were building regularly. And so my role was to assess them for accessibility, as well as doing all the other checks. And so I got used to kind of going through course by course, but also criteria by criteria. So this is for those folks who are doing a little bit more in-depth checks. Um, and you can keep track and share that with your team. All right, I'm going to wrap up. There's all my contact information. I share a lot of accessibility tips on LinkedIn regularly and blogging. It's very specific on how to understand these guidelines, how to put them into practice. So please go ahead and follow me over there. And Susie, thank you so much for having me. I hope this wasn't a snooze fest. I could get, but yeah, great. Thank you.
No, it's fantastic. Thank you very much. It's great information. And yes, definitely, if they are not following you, they will want to follow you on LinkedIn. So we have about 3 minutes if anyone has any questions. I'm going to stop the recording, but if anyone else has questions that they want to ask outside of the recording.
Thank you, Laura.